So as you see, the title is slightly different from what was in the announcement because people were asking me, can you really make it specific? Can you make it very relevant? What is coming at us? And well, as we know, 2023, quite some things are coming at us. And especially on ESG and carbon management, we see new rules coming out both in China and in Europe. So that's why I made the topic of today cost-effective online ESG and carbon management in China and Europe, anno 2023, but also beyond. First question is, who is ready to meet next year's requirements on ESG and carbon reporting, both in China and Europe? I'd like to see some hands, if that's possible, or at least contemplate a bit about it. Because it's a tough question, right? Before Christmas and New Year, isn't it? And it sounds as yet another burden to your business. But let me promise you, for this time, today I will show you how the changes in today's world are bringing you also an opportunity that is as big as the coming of the internet. And there is some reason for excitement. So I will first give you an overview of what you need to know to comply with European and Chinese regulations on ESG and carbon. And next, I will illustrate that companies that are able to reduce carbon in their value chain will be able to mine carbon as the new gold and how to get it. Make sure you stay until the end because you'll get access to our new white paper on the Internet of Sustainability Data. It includes the details behind all the topics I will touch on today. Climate change is making today's world a stormy place. And I not only mean stormy weather, I also mean this metaphorically. Even talking about climate change these days is like walking through a minefield. There are as many opinions as there are people. For the first time in my career, I see companies sometimes even hiding their environmental efforts to avoid being challenged for it. After environmental greenwashing, we now have environmental bashing. So in order to navigate these stormy oceans, one needs to know where the wind is going, where are the highest waves, and where to find safe harbors. That's what I will talk about today. Three systemic changes are happening, with circular economy in the middle. Now, a truly circular economy minimizes its footprint both at the level of production and consumption. Consumption requires production, and production requires consumption. This means that to close the economic circle of production and consumption, reliable collaboration and exchange of data is needed. Now, too many companies today come up with their individual data due to a lack of a unified, agreed approach. And in doing so, they often even make their books look as green as a painted tree. So, as a result, ESG actually is increasingly being scrutinized, but regulators are catching up. And companies are realizing the tide is changing. Competition exists and will continue to exist, but we need to level up the game and collaborate so we can compete as a species to survive. This requires us to exchange more and to look at the value we bring to each other. Now, human selfishness requires tangible benefits, and carbon is becoming the common denominator and the leading business indicator that actually might make this happen. Now, most of you know that companies have three types of emissions. Quickly reminding, Scope 1 stands for emissions directly from the factory. Scope 2 is everything related to the energy a company has purchased. And finally, the hard nut to crack is Scope 3, because this stands for all other emissions in your value chain, both upstream and downstream. In short, all the companies in your supply chain. Now, have a look at this map. It represents the global carbon flows. And it shows how production and consumption binds China with the rest of the world. This means that by far, the biggest part of Scope 3 emissions are happening in China. It is true that Firms are now exploring strategies to regionalize, reducing dependencies and stabilizing supply chains. But in order to meet global decarbonization, we will need multi company, multi industry, multi regional collaboration. Now, carbon is not only the leading indicator for decarbonization, it is also becoming a global currency. Just last week, the G7 announced they will form a climate club, striving to align carbon prices across compliant carbon markets via emission trading systems. Could people please mute their microphone? Thank you. So, the current cumulative global market value of this carbon is estimated at 270 billion US dollar, and it covers 22% of the global emissions. Now, in 2021, higher carbon prices resulted in a record 84 billion US dollar global pricing, carbon pricing revenue. Now, this is about 60% higher than 2020 and is incentivizing investment towards deep decarbonization. The International Sustainable Standards Board is now making attempts to create a harmonized approach between the biggest regions and countries in the world, such as the US, Europe, China, Japan, and so on. And under the pressure of the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, the ISSB recently included double materiality. Now, this means that in their financial reporting, companies not only need to include impacts they may get from external factors such as climate change, but also the impacts they cause on external factors such as climate change. Now, a recent report from Deloitte found that climate change could cost the global economy 178 trillion US dollar by 2070. You don't want any of that on your books. Now, the conventional oil and gas companies may be making a huge profit at this moment because of geopolitics, but they are heavy and they are on thin ice, and the ice is melting. Let's have a quick look at the latest regulatory developments in this regard and what these mean to you. At the highest level in Europe, we of course have the Green Deal, which sets the overall picture. Pay attention, reducing greenhouse gas emissions with 55% in 7 years will be disruptive. The most imminent new requirement is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which starts in about 2 weeks from now and which covers carbon footprint for scopes 1 to 3. This means that the impact of the total supply chain is considered. I won't go into the details today, but you can find all you need to know in the white paper, which we will share at the end of this presentation. Now, what does this mean for carbon prices? As time moves forward, we can expect carbon prices to go up over time as carbon caps are reduced over time. The pressure on companies to decarbonize will grow, even more so if targets are not met. Just last weekend, the European regulators reached an agreement to revise the EU emission trading system and to further reduce the carbon limits to make Europe fit for transition to a climate neutral economy. Now, a bit further down the road, an EU supply chain law is in the making, and it is expected to pass May 2023. Now, this new law is also known as the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act and will include a specific set of ESG metrics. It applies to any company either directly or indirectly, and high-risk sectors are textile, leather, agriculture, forestry, commercial fishing, minings, and so on. Again, more details, go and have a look at the white paper. I won't cover the US today, but can share that the Securities and Exchange Commission is working on a proposal that listed companies have to report carbon footprints. In the first year, they need to cover scope 1 and 2, and in the second year, also scope 3 is included. Again, read more in the white paper. Now let's move on to China. At the highest level in China, we have the 14th five-year plan, in which the Chinese government set green development targets as binding targets. Now, binding means they are key performance indicators for all levels in China's government and for China's industry. It's important to realize these 5 year plans continuously move the needle to a green and digital China. You can also read more about it in an article that I wrote a few years on this topic a few years ago. Now, since February 8th this year, companies need to start monitoring and also reporting their performance against a number of ESG and carbon parameters. Now, what is special here is that these new rules require not just companies to disclose their information individually on their own websites, but that their information will be gathered and disclosed on dedicated platforms set up by the local authorities that are publicly accessible, aiming to create a sense of responsibility. Now, China's current ETS trading scheme is compliance driven, but it has no absolute cap. For each kilowatt hour generated, key emission entities will receive a fixed amount of allowances. So the trading stream between the entities will depend on their carbon intensity in relation to the benchmark. That is the average carbon intensity. Now, the benchmark changes in line with the central government priorities and the best industry practice. So it's again a moving needle. China's circular economy is centrally driven and aims at building a prosperous society. Now, this is in line with the earlier mentioned 5 year plans and the key performance indicators. It's actually implemented at 3 levels. It's quite interesting how it works. At the regional level, fiscal and economic conditions are created to develop eco-cities, to adjust industrial composition, and to create a resource recycling infrastructure. At the industrial level, the use of resources is optimized, aiming for a symbiosis in eco-industrial parks, developing an eco-agricultural ecosystem, and reverse logistics. At the individual business level, cleaner production principles are promoted with eco-design of products, waste minimization, eco-innovation, and even with focus on customer behavior. Now, this systematic, centrally driven plan economy is what makes China's society organized and engaged. To illustrate how deep this goes, I would like to share a story that I experienced with a taxi driver not so long time ago. So I stepped in a taxi and I was giving him my address, and he was a bit nervous and saying, excuse me, sir, do you know how to get there? Because I haven't been driving my car so long. And I said, don't worry, I live there, I'll tell you where to go. And then I said, so what were you doing before that you just started your taxi driver career? And he said, well, I was running a company, but it was shut down because of environmental reasons. That triggered my attention because, of course, that was my business. So I said, okay, what happened? And he said, well, the government, they shut me down because I wanted to develop new apartments and a new zone here. So they told me to go back to my hometown in the other province and to start another factory there. So how do you feel about that? I said, well, I'm not happy about that, of course, because I was making very good money, and now the government is going to make good money from the land, but that's what it is. And I said, well, how do you feel about that? And he said, well, you know, I made good money here, and they already told me there that if I set up another factory there, I will get support, and I'll probably drive my car for 1 or 2 years and then just start all over again there. In the end, the country goes in the right direction, and it's benefiting me, and I have faith in where things are going. So this was something which really struck me, and this is an attitude that I see with many people in China. And this is partially because of this coherent approach and this vision. Now, back to the presentation. As you can see here, the overall plan also comes with very specific quantitative KPI. They are released by the National Development and Reform Commission. And in addition to these quantitative KPI, the plan also lists 3 key circular economy tasks to achieve before the end of the 14th 5-year plan. First one is to build a resource recycling industry, improving resource utilization efficiency. The second is to build a recycling system for waste materials, fostering a recycling oriented society. And thirdly, deepening the development of an agricultural circular economy and establishing circular production. So these tasks are directly directed at local governments to interpret and implement according to local conditions. In this way, the central plan economy functions almost as a large corporation driving collaboration in a matrix organization. Now, China also developed its own ESG reporting program. And this program is such an example of public-private collaboration. It includes standards aligned with the ones from the ISSB that I mentioned earlier, and it was developed by China's biggest companies and led by China's Enterprise Reform and Develop Society. Now, this is a think tank under China's State-Owned Assets Supervision Administration Commission. So you can see the matrix at work here. Another great example of collaboration is the one between the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, or IPE in China, that's an NGO, and the Natural Resource Defense Council, which is an environmental advocacy group in the US. Now, they both are pioneers in transparency and sustainability data. And in 2009, they developed a pollution information transparency, or the PITI. And the PT ranked companies on their level of environmental pollution. Now, at that time, it led to several large MNCs to upgrade their China manufacturing operations and supply chain. And Apple was one of the first companies actually acting upon it, because they were being challenged on the way their suppliers were performing in China, and they got a huge slide in their sales. So they reacted quickly, and in just 2 or 3 years, they actually got on top of the list of companies taking supply chain management serious. Now, this information is freely accessible, and now it is actually upgraded to the CITI, which is the Corporate Information Transparency Index. Next to the CITI, more recently, IPE also created CATI. And CATI stands for the Corporate Climate Action Transparency Index. Now, its purpose is to assess both manufacturers that outsource production to suppliers and manufacturers that consume a lot of energy during production. They provide a transparent ranking across industry sectors, and during the first 6 months of 2022, close to 30 brands already encouraged more than 1,000 facilities in China to publicly disclose their carbon data. Now, CATI also already was upgraded in 2022 and now covers the carbon footprint of Chinese supply chains in 5 dimensions with sector-specific weighing factors. And CATI includes indicators such as carbon intensity targets, carbon neutrality targets, carbon assets, and third-party verification, and also benchmarks, again, with international mainstream standards. And again, it is freely accessible online on the same IPE website. I'll illustrate this in a moment. Next, I would like to mention InsBlue. InsBlue is a supply chain management platform that was born out of IPE. InsBlue has structured the information in the IPE database and other public official data channels from a business perspective. Their platform enables companies to profile Chinese factories from an ESG and carbon performance perspective and to drive guided environmental disclosures throughout supply chains. Now, disclosure can be done to the public or to specific target groups. The platform also has built an online certification process in it by CEC, which is an internationally acknowledged DOE. And as such, the platform provides an ideal solution for Western companies to screen their Chinese suppliers or for investors to profile and reduce ESG or carbon-related risks in their investment portfolios. Now, the IPE website with CITI and CATI is ideal if you want to quickly profile a company in China on ESG and carbon. The InsBlue platform is ideal if you want to actually manage a single or portfolio of companies or supply chain. I'm quickly going to give you a video to illustrate this platform. Can you please confirm you see the city website now?
Yes, we are seeing the website.
Okay. Normally, you should also hear the sound. In case that is not the case, please let me know. Illustration video. On the IPE website, you can start from the city or the CATI index and look at the different parameters they've used to compare the companies. For example, responsiveness, transparency, how much is its weight, compliance, corrective actions they've been taking, how much they are extending their actions into the supply chain, what about their energy conservation, and how much are they promoting green choices. You can see the list here. Now, if you, for example, type in one company, Unilever, and you look for it, click on it, then you can see both for the city and the CAPI, the Corporate Climate Action Index, what is their score, how do they rank in their industry, and how are they scoring for the individual parameters that I just indicated. So if you want to get a quick insight in how a company in China is performing, then this is an ideal website. Okay, now I will share a quick video on InsBlue, the InsBlue platform. This platform is ideal if you want to see the details behind the scoring, the original documents, audit report, and so on. Now, it's also good for doing carbon management, as you can see here. This is, for example, my list of companies that I'm following with whom I'm working to reduce carbon. Here are the actions of companies that already have been verified and certified. And if you can see, you open it, you can actually see the scores on how much fuel they've been using and so on, the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Now, you can download the report here with more details if you like, but let's go back here. The interesting part is that this platform also allows me to monitor companies on ESG. Now, if you click on one company here, you can see the information about their scoring. You can also see how they evolve over time and how they are being engaged actually to start taking actions and to disclose these to reduce their scoring or to improve their scoring. Now, their risk scoring is categorized in a number of parameters. You can also see their carbon management again here. And the beauty of this is that in categories ESG, you can see the original documents, of course in Chinese, but you can use Google Chrome to translate, that are actually showing what is really going on with this company. For example, an inspection that has happened, and it will go into the detail. It will start talking about this specific kiln or even this fire extinguisher was not compliant, and therefore there has been a report and there has been a fine or whatsoever. But also production restrictions, so you can also see which supplier is having issues with production because being restricted by the government, because not meeting the environmental requirements, and also who has been exempted from production restriction, and so on. There's a process for disclosure with the different steps they can take. For example, doing a green choice audit. Here's the carbon disclosure process. Now, on climate change, there is also, as I mentioned earlier, the carbon management, but also the emission calculator. It helps you to calculate your emissions, and it helps you here to do the online verification and certification. There's also a tab for listed companies where you can actually see different companies and all their subsidiaries. And again, you can go into the details that I just showed you before for these different subsidiaries. Next, there's a training module, and there's resources for how to access regulations, and so on and so on. Okay. Go back to the presentation. So that was a quick introduction both to the CT, CATI, and InsBlue platforms. Now let's move the conversation to ecosystems, the last part of today's webinar. And I'd like to first check, are you still with me? Has it been valuable so far? Please show some hands or feel free to drop comments and questions in the chat. All right, ecosystems. The WBCSD, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, under the UN umbrella, is now building PACT, which stands for the Partnership of Carbon Transparency. Now, this includes global big players such as IBM, SAP, Shell, and so on, but also startups and solution providers such as Circular Tree. Now, the partnership focuses on the interoperability to standardize the exchange of carbon data. This is an example. Another example is in Europe, Gaia X, and specifically, for example, under the automotive sector, Catena X. Now, Catena X aims to cover the data space of the entire automotive industry. A first startup is being born out of this consortium as we speak, awaiting merger clearance. Now, the founding fathers and the owners are 11 major companies. An app is going to be coming out for SMEs that will provide data to help them decarbonize and report ESG. I can't say more about it, but have seen the deck in the video, and I think it's amazing. It's again a milestone, as for the first time we see large companies work together in a cooperative way, competitive and cooperative. They cooperate while competing, making money. Some of these consortia are initiated by the companies themselves engaging with their own supply chains and the main stakeholders, such as the one from Siemens before, for example, Estinium. More details in the white paper, as always. Now, all these initiatives, they are building on industrial ecosystems that thrive on a blockchain-based exchange of data throughout the complete supply chain to get zero carbon products. And as we saw before, a lot of the suppliers are still based in China, meaning that the carbon data from this supply chain basis needs to be included in the calculations in Europe and the other parts of the world to get to zero carbon products. Now, as we illustrated just now, ESG and carbon data in China are available online in these platforms, and the platforms can be used to run supply chain programs to reduce their carbon and also to improve ESG performance. So several companies are actually engaging in this new space. Now, this also offers a major opportunity for any company that can reduce carbon throughout supply chains. Such companies can grow exponentially in the same way Uber or Didi Dacio did. Their growth is not limited by finances or resources to grow. And in the same way, Uber or Didi didn't have to buy cars or hire drivers to grow. They just need to present their decarbonizing solutions to the companies that want to or have to reduce the carbon in their value chain. And they will grow quickly, exponentially. Now, the tech behind this to make this work is fintech and Web3. So it's time for the clean tech and the fintech to unite and to profit together, and time for companies to discover that Scope 3 decarbonization may be possible after all. As said, just last week, the G7 announced they will form a climate club striving to align carbon prices across compliance carbon markets. And China earlier this year announced they will reopen the CCER market, which is also with carbon credits. Now, with this, I would like to end today's presentation, but it's not the end. I promised to share the white paper with you, but first allow me to acknowledge my co-authors with whom I have really enjoyed many long discussions putting all of this together. So please note down their contact details and expect to see them soon telling their version of the story. Feel free to reach out to any one of us. We are happy to put you in contact with the right people in this ecosystem and make this work because we all believe in competition. That means collaboration, helping each other. If you have any questions on how to access InsBlue, just reach out to myself or to Rob Kirke. He is also in the call today. Rob is an amazing guy and a leader in anything related to ESG and carbon. He leads global panels and knows how to transition your company to become a leader in ESG and carbon. He also can help you tap into the ESG and carbon data in Europe and China directly via API connections. Now, Soraya. Soraya is a bright lady, currently finalizing her executive MBA and knows all of you, knows all that you want to know about bringing circular economy into your business. And she also knows how to access renewables in China in the most cost effective way. She not only knows everything about renewables, she is a resource of renewable energy. So energetic she is. Now, Gunther is the blockchain guru. Reach out to him if you need help to ensure your data moves from A to B between companies in a secure way. You want to know him as he is directly involved in the European initiatives with Katina X and the WPCST. Now, reach out to Jörg or to myself if you need support at the European level. Jörg is a self made man who already sold his first company specialized in ESG data, and it looks like he may be presenting our white paper at Davos next year. Finally, if you need help to de risk your investment in renewable energy transitions and also to create new revenue streams from decarbonization, then contact me at Pulsar Power. Pulsar Power is one of these tech companies that I mentioned before that is growing exponentially, and that's why I joined them 2 months ago. So, ladies and gentlemen, this leads me not to the end, but to the beginning. I revert back to my favorite painting from Japanese painter Katsushika Hokusai. It illustrates a poem by the Chinese painter Li Bai, and it uses Dutch in depth painting techniques. Now, for me, this painting represents what becomes possible when forces unite. So, when the storm outside is big and the waves are high, row together to get on top of them, and you will be able to touch the sky. The drivers are here and the markets are there. Step into the boat. This is going to be a big one. Scan the QR if you want to download the white paper or copy the link. You can also find it on LinkedIn. It's a lengthy document, but we wanted to share it completely with you. So enjoy. And if you have any questions today, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you very much. Cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I would like now to open the floor to the Q&A session today. If there's any question coming from the audience, please feel free to write them in the Zoom service for the Q&A session. And coming back to the presentation, I believe it has been it would be interesting to develop a bit more. What is the direction in which the Chinese political environment is moving towards ESG? We saw that they are becoming increasingly relevant up until 2025. What is your perception of this direction? What do you envisage for the future?
Well, if there's one thing that you can see in China's policy is that it has consistency across the 5 year plans. And it's since 2007 that I saw for the first time they started to collect information on the environmental quality. 2012, it became collecting information on the industrial impact on the environment. 2017, they started to realize it was a big problem. So they started to organize the battle against environmental pollution. Now, 2020, they saw that a lot had improved, but that was the time when COVID hit. And I never forget the presentation from the State Council on March 2020 saying they would reorganize or reinstate the economy, and they would um, actually digitize a lot of the value chain. So what I've seen over the past couple of years is that this whole value chain, the industrial value chain in China, has been digitized. The large state-owned enterprises, as well as the private enterprises, as the SMEs, as the startups, but also as the institutes and so on, they all are digitally connected now. The direction of the country is continuing in the same way, and the digitization is actually accelerating this. This is, for example, why recently you saw the carbon markets reopening. And not only that, also the digital currency has come out. Now, think in terms of what can be done if both a carbon market and a digital currency is connected. Suddenly, you got carbon credits that actually can become a currency, like I was talking about. So, um, all the things that I see seem to be moving in a direction that China is going to leverage the enormous decarbonization effort that is required, and actually is going to build on this to drive decarbonization not only in China but even outside of China.
We have a question coming from the audience. We are asked concerning DPP requirements that are becoming heavy in the EU, according to the person that's posing the question. The question is actually if ESG requirements are going in this direction in China too. So if they are becoming heavy, I'm guessing as a question.
Well, the requirements already have been heavy. If you saw the 2017 move, that's when the government started what they call the environmental storm. So a lot of companies were actually closed down if they weren't meeting environmental standards or were having emissions in times where there was bad air quality. So they have been taking this very serious already. Now, everything that I see is basically indicating in the same direction. It's only becoming more and more transparent. So the difference that you have with for example, Europe or China is that the information from the companies and how they are performing is actually made publicly available. Companies that are, how shall I say it, not performing well, they are being punished by, for example, production restrictions. But companies that are performing very well, they actually are rewarded with green financing or with exemption from production restrictions. And if you see the green financing, the digitization, and the how shall I say it, the innovation for China, they are all combined. So they're raising the bar based on what is possible with the best technologies, and they're asking the industry to meet those. The KPI that you saw that I shared earlier, they basically change as time moves forward, depending on what is possible. And it is used to drive the companies to be the best performance, because the government sees this not only as a way to improve the environment, but also as a way to be more competitive, because using less energy, using less resources, obviously is better competition.
Thank you very much. And moving back to the small and medium enterprises that are present in Europe and they are interested in the Chinese market, how can these entities, these small and medium enterprises, benefit from China's ESG policies? How can they get a positive outcome from these regulations?
Yeah, so there's two different ways. One way is if a company is actually doing well, they actually get a more lenience from local government. So, for example, permits they need to get and things like that. Also, the other way is if they come with solutions that really can make a difference in China, and I must say it's not always so obvious anymore because in many fields Chinese technologies are already doing very well. But if a solution really can make a difference in the market, you'll see that uh, you don't even need to do much marketing. The government will be marketing you because the only thing they really care about is fast implementation. That's when you, for example, will easily get access to all kinds of subsidies, all kinds of fiscal benefits, and so on. So it's always a matter of finding the right connection locally in China and then engaging with the local ecosystem to roll out your solution. So one of the things here definitely means that you have to work with partners, and partners should be both at the level of the industry as the level of government.
I see. And I would also like to ask how are the businesses in China being motivated that a strong ESG proposition can create value for the longer term, and eventually to look into the probably probable advanced solution USMEs could offer? How are they responding from the calls from the government?
Um, can you specify your question? So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I
So
get the question. Yeah.
yeah. So the idea is that strong ESG propositions. How can they motivate businesses in China? How can these ESG proposition create value for the long term for the business as well?
For the long term. Um,
This,
I'm not
of
sure how.
course, the idea would be that of linking the impact that the ESG proposition are going to have in relation to potential solutions that USMEs could offer to business in China. So this is the idea behind the question.
Yeah. Well, again, it all depends on the specific solutions that you're bringing to the market, right? Because ESG is a very broad term. So, in one way, it's a reputational issue. So, it's not something that you want to have against you if you're not performing well, because then you get exposed, like with the indices, with Citi and Kati that I showed you earlier. But the key thing is, again, if you are, for example, able to contribute to those tasks that I mentioned earlier. For example, to reduce the amount of waste by being more efficient or to recycle certain kind of products or to provide the technology to scale certain solutions that are available in China, that's when you really get wings in China. This is when the government actually is very eager to sit together with you. And I can tell you a story. So I was sitting next to the CEO of a large chemical factories, a table with all C-level people. And one of the government officials was asking me, Johnny, could you please ask the people here on the table, because he was asking in Chinese, um, if they have a solution to recycle this specific waste product. And he was talking about like polyurethane foam, the one that is in beds and so on. And I asked this question, and the people from the industry were saying, "Well, yes, of course, there are technologies to do that, but this is not economically viable." And then the government person again said, "Yeah, please tell them, is it really possible? Because that's what I want to know. Uh, and if it's possible, if it's not economically possible, then it's a matter of us figuring out how to make it economically possible." And they said, yeah, but it's, for example, the reverse logistics to how to get back that waste centralized at the companies. And the second challenge is that if we do this, it's actually leading to a product which is more expensive than using natural resources. So these are the two reasons why, although it's technically possible, we can't do it. And again, the official said, that's not the right way of thinking, he said. The government's role is that if you have a technology that can solve a specific problem, we need to find out how to actually help you to make this problem possible and to support it until it becomes economically viable. So reverse logistics is something we can arrange with the infrastructure we have. The economics of it, we can arrange that with subsidizing. Once we do that and there's a market for it, the economy will follow. And you can see this is exactly what they've done, for example, with solar panels. And this is exactly what they're doing at this very moment with hydrogen. So it really depends on whether you have solutions and think out of the box. Don't think in terms of this is economically not feasible or this is practically not feasible. No, they just want to know like what is technical feasible. So whoever has a smart engineering brain that can figure out solutions, they have a chance. Now the other beautiful thing is that um, the way to bring a product to the market also is incredibly fast in China because they combine, um, how shall I say it, the efforts of the data that's available with the infrastructure that the government has to roll out solutions. Now, what do I mean with that? I'll give you an example. Um, this industrial value chain that I mentioned earlier, right? All the data is basically centralized in there. Now, different parts in the world have different philosophy on data. In let's just say in a very simple way, in the US, the data is a lot in the hands of the large companies. In Europe, the data is in the hand of the individual. But in China, the data is in the hand of the government. Now, the government's thinking is that the data that's collected from the whole industrial value chain, which is digitized, which is a lot of big data, should actually be made available to the industry to find solutions. So the big data can be accessed by any kind of company that wants to leverage this. That's why pharmaceutical solutions go very, very fast in China now. Now, the data is accessible in a way that it's still how shall I say it, doesn't expose China to risk, which means they provide it by means of the institutes and so on. So you need to do this with a local partner. But the solutions you can develop upon it are yours. So once you have a solution that works in one part of the country and that is with a local government partner and a local institute, and you bring this to the market with a partner or a local entrepreneur, once this works in one area of the country, it is endorsed because you are doing this in this construction. It's basically it's a triple helix structure: the government, the institutes, and the industry. Now, once you have that endorsed in one region, you will see it very easily rolls out to other regions. And in other regions, you simply have to work with the entrepreneurs because the local government there and the institutes there will have the data, and the local entrepreneur there will understand how it can be applied in the market there. So it rolls out very, very quickly into different parts of the country. And because it's all digitized, it goes much faster and much more cost effective. So again, it really depends on the specific solution you have. And beware, it's not because you have something that works well in Europe that it also works well in China. That's why this local connection is so important. And it's not because you think you have something good that it does not yet exist in China. And if it already exists in China, competition is very hard, not only with foreigners, but also between Chinese.
That's clear. And we also have, I believe, one final question. We've been asked if it's possible to make a few real examples of potential cooperation between EU and Chinese companies in green hydrogen tech development. This is, I believe, a a tough question. It's on the one hand sufficiently broad, and at the same time it asks to provide some detailed example. And I don't know if you want to generalize maybe a little bit on this kind of potential possibilities of cooperation between EU and Chinese companies in green tech.
Well, hydrogen is an interesting product. Why? Because it exists in an existing industry. So there are facilities that can be used for it. However, when you compare hydrogen with other solutions such as electrification, it is not yet as efficient. For example, to transport energy, electricity, or even to store it or to transfer it from one, how shall I say it, from one phase to another phase. But there's a lot of experience with hydrogen, and the industry exists. So this I want to say first because I see hydrogen not as a best solution now, but as a best solution or a good solution in the future, but specifically where hydrogen is available in the industry, so it can be used there. Now, if I see how much centrally driven in this plan economy efforts are being done in China to do research on hydrogen, then I know that they are going at a much, much faster speed to find new solutions than most other places in the world. Even other places in the world might have been further ahead compared to China in the past. So, this is really where efforts in research and development should be combined. This is where the nodes should be put together, and the different ways of looking at things, east and west, actually is a benefit here. So the way that would work there is to really look in terms of how can we put our resources together to get faster use of hydrogen in a good way.
Perfect. And I do not see any other questions coming from the audience. So unless we have some very last minute question, I would like to first of all take the opportunity to thank all of you for taking part in this event. As you can see on the slide that I'm sharing, there's the opportunity to provide your feedback on the event through the QR codes that you can see in this slide. Please do provide your feedback so that we can always strive for improving the events that we organize. And after that, I would like, of course, to thank the Belgian Chinese Chamber of Commerce for co-organizing this event with us, and our speaker, Mr. Johnny Burways, for providing this presentation. It has been a pleasure to host this webinar, and please once again provide your feedback. And should you have any questions on how the USME Center can support small and medium enterprises that would like to access the Chinese market, do not hesitate to contact me. You can find all information on the USME Center webpage. So thank you once again very much for participating in this event, and given the period of the year, have a nice winter break and nice holidays. Thank you very much and have a good day.